Our next guest once described himself as a classical liberal, but now he says that the left is no longer liberal. They have turned moderates and liberals into, quote, the politically homeless class. It's all laid out in Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason. We welcome the host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be with you guys.
All right. Well, in your book, you talk about that we should focus on the facts over feelings. But I want to take a recent story, the Flynn case. When you look at it, the facts are pretty obvious. They're out there now that we've seen these 302s from the FBI, but people are still weighing in with their emotions, it seems like. Is there any hope?
You know, in a weird way, this facts over feelings thing is the biggest issue that those of us that are in the news or care about politics or current events or just sort of the culture wars that have been going on for quite some time. This is the biggest issue we have to deal with because we're all cordoning ourselves off on social media. We pick who we follow, what we watch, and usually that stuff just reinforces our preconceived notions about things. And you're right. I mean, as we're watching the Flynn stuff sort of leak out, I mean, you're really only seeing it from, let's say, right-leaning media. And when it does sort of make its way over to CNN or anything more left-leaning, usually they're kind of mocking it or they're mocking the media that's touching it and the rest of it. And this makes it very hard for people to ascertain what truth is, because if you're only hearing it from one side, actually one of the things I discuss in the book is that there are 4 types of fake news. And I would argue the most nefarious one of them is the stuff that the media ignores because it goes against their narrative. And I think we're seeing a version of that right now with the Flynn stuff and also what's going on with Joe Biden and Tara Reade and a couple other stories.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the other things that I want to play for you, let me play for you a clip from Brian Stetler from CNN, a diatribe that he went off on this past weekend.
It's so disappointing to look at what we're seeing from right-wing media these days, where there's such an obsession with the deep state and these revelations about the Russia probe and the decision about Michael Flynn. They're treating the Michael Flynn story like it's a bigger deal than the deaths of 2,000 Americans a day.
You know, Dave, I think this kind of plays into what you were just saying, and you talk about in the book, that we self-select where we get it from. But for Brian to make a claim like that, I think is pretty outrageous. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can care about the pandemic, you can care about people, but if you're on the right and you watched what happened with the attempt to go after Trump and what happened with Michael Flynn, I think it's not just about Michael Flynn. I actually think it should be worrisome to every American about what was done in the justice system. And so the idea that he gets to set the narrative, Brian, and say, if you don't care about what I care about when you do, then you're a bad person. And then he sort of paints all conservative media with this broad brush.
Yeah, you're totally right. And for the record, I didn't know you guys were going to show that clip, but that's very much exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, look, Stelter has sort of become the meme of the internet when it comes to exposing what sort of fake corporate news is. Your point about walking and chewing gum, that's it. It's like, how does he get to decide what we're supposed to care about and when we're supposed to care about it? Let's not forget that, you know, pretty much everyone online on Twitter and YouTube and everywhere else knew about the Tara Reade story for at least 3 weeks while CNN didn't touch it. So it's like, well, where were you on that, Brian? So, I mean, this is consistently what they do. You know, most of us want a good news media. We want that. Every time I have to tweet, you know, like with what Chuck Todd did yesterday on Meet the Press, editing what Barr said, it's like every time I have to expose that, I'm like, I just wish I didn't have to do this again, because I wish you guys would do your job. Do your job, and I'll find some other stuff to talk about, you know? But they seem incapable of doing it. And the line I always use on this is that it's journalists, and I have to use air quotes there, it's journalists who are destroying journalism.
You know, it's interesting. Speaking of that, you have 1.2 million followers, or not followers, subscribers to your show on YouTube. That's more than CNN gets on most of its shows during the day. And yet they seem to think that they have the higher moral ground when it comes to dictating what we should care about than, say, someone like you, who actually has engaging in civil conversations with somebody. It's fascinating to me that they almost pretend that people who aren't with them don't exist. And that there's this fascination of who could these people be that aren't watching us all day long and shaking their head in violent agreement.
That's it. That's right. Right there. They have controlled the narrative for so long that they think that that is never going to go away, except we're watching it crumble right now. I'm in my home studio. I was doing a home studio thing before everybody started doing it with COVID. So I've been here for about 3 years. This is my garage. We have a full-on TV studio here, and I have a slim trim operation that is in no debt, that my guys are paid really well, and we're doing the best we can with about 8 full-time employees. And as we watch mainstream media crumble because of the lack of trust that they themselves instigated in the first place, but then also because their financial model does not make sense. What you guys are doing with Newsmax, I mean, we could pick, The Blaze, the Daily Wire, all of these, and they generally are right-leaning, and there's a reason for that, because I think right-leaning people were so pushed away by mainstream media for so long that they said, hey, there's a whole internet out there. Let's build something really cool and new and slim and trim. And now there's many of us out here doing the same thing. And for the record, guys, I feel in no competition with anybody. The more voices out there doing good work, I'm like, that is just fantastic. Let's keep pushing, because to your point, Sean, they're not going to suddenly say, oh, you know what, we're actually been dropping the ball for quite some time and we better let these guys in.
Dave, one of the things that I think is interesting, and you've been on the left, and I don't want to, you can describe where you are now, but it seems to me that when you agree with somebody on the other side, for example, Lindsay and I talked about the other day that Mika Brzezinski did a good job interviewing Biden. I mean, there was not perfect, but she did good. Guys on the right will go after you. And then when Chris Hayes on MSNBC asked some questions about Biden, the guys on the left went after him. How dare you ask that? If there's no way that you can actually acknowledge the other side in a civil way anymore without your own team attacking you.
This is one of the most dangerous things that we have in politics, because first off, none of us are perfect, right? I'm an interviewer, but I'm certainly not a perfect interviewer. You guys are interviewers. That doesn't mean you're the perfect interviewer, just like Chuck Todd or Mika Brzezinski or anyone else. This need to sort of, somebody did something not exactly the way that I wanted them to do it, so now I got to destroy them. This is a big problem. I would say that generally speaking, it's much worse on the left. But as you point out, there is a version of it on the right that I think that we should all sort of be looking out for. I mean, what I can tell you is that as someone that was a progressive, I mean, I was a Bernie supporter. You can find the videos there, and now I see those as the complete antithetical views to anything else that I believe in. But as what the left has sort of done is that if you don't buy into 10 out of 10 of the things that they want, they're just pushing you out. What I think the right has done well over the last couple of years, and not all the time, but the right has basically said, hey, we got MAGA people here. We have more traditional conservatives here. We've got libertarians. We've got the sort of disaffected liberals. And let's try to figure something out. Now, that doesn't mean they're perfect at it, but I do think that the future of American politics is sort of a center-right future, which, by the way, we've seen the UK move in that direction. We've seen Australia move in that direction. We've seen Israel move in that direction. I think that Western countries are realizing you have to have some basic principles and not just govern by how you feel on any given moment.
Right.
Dave, really appreciate your insights and you sharing your view with us and your book. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.